Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Go Beyond. My name is Alyssa Robinson, and I am here today with our senior pastor, Reverend Daniel Humbert, and Julie Hawkins, our director of children and family ministries. And you are watching Go Beyond, where we dig deeper into the message on Sunday morning. So we are in the middle of our worship series called Shift Happens, and I over enunciate that every time just to be safe, where we're talking about what we can learn about parenting in scripture. And so this week, our focus is on parenting principles. And we talked about the 3 ways to value your kids and to show them that they're loved through touch, time, and talk. And so since I am not an expert on parenting, since I do not have kids, I am going to pass off this discussion to Julie and Daniel, but I hope that you get some great insights from their conversation today.
Okay, let me just clarify that. We are not experts either. We are just parents trying to do the best we
You're
can.
more of an expert than me. I've already told Julie the only comparison I have is my dogs, which I've heard it's not the same. I don't know.
We're all crawling uphill.
Yeah, we are definitely. I want to talk about, you mentioned the 3 action points on Sunday, which Alyssa mentioned: touch, talk, and time. But it seems to me, just as a parent, that all of these things kind of go back to time. And if we don't make intentional time, we won't have the ability for touch interaction or talk interaction. So can you talk a little bit about the difference between intentional time as opposed to all the time we spend parenting in everyday life?
Yeah. Well, I'll do my best, right? I think, first of all, we have to acknowledge that it's a both and set of circumstances. That is to say, the everyday time, just the time of passing and or eating and or being in the same room together, that's still important and still very needful, even if it has no structure, no intentionality, no deliberateness of any kind. That's still needful, right? Because in part, it's time. I'm there, I'm present. But then, excuse me, in addition to that, we do need some deliberate time, right? Time that we set aside for whatever, whether that's a deliberate date, if you will, that you go on with your kid, or a deliberate outing that you do, or designated time during the day where you spend time with your kid. They're both needful. And the fun part, I guess, or the kind of neat part is, on the intentional component, it can be really fun. It can be really, has all kinds of opportunities for interaction, but it's important to do both. I hope I didn't intimate that sort of unstructured, unallocated time is not important, because it is. But I would agree with you, Julie. I think that all 3 of them start with time. And I think it's critical that we look at it that way, that we think about it that way.
And when you were talking about time, you mentioned that time equals value in the mindset of a kid. So how do you think that impacts their sense of worth and their sense of being?
Yeah.
The amount of time we spend?
Well, I would also add to this, that's one of those components that's not just about kids, right? We all value time, and we all value time with other people. So I would maintain that younger kids, toddlers, elementary age, it's extremely valuable that we commit time, that we offer our presence, that we are there with them. As they become adolescents, obviously they don't want as much time, but they still want it. They don't want you to know that. They don't want to ask for it, but they still want it.
But they want it when they want it, yeah, on their timeline.
They want it on their time frame, in their chunks, and and in their format, and that's absolutely right. But they still want it. One of our kids in particular, I would just say, without divulging which one, is actually quite good at about what I refer to as self-regulating that. That is to say, when they are clear that they want time, they just come and spend time with us. They initiate it, which is kind of nice. The other one, not so much, but one of them does. And so when I get old, I forget. What was the question again?
We were talking about how time impacts a child's sense of worth,
Yeah.
or really anybody's sense of worth. It can be the same thing with your spouse.
Yeah. So I think we could all own, at least most of us, that where we spend our time and where we spend our dollars equals what we value.
Mhm.
And we don't always have to like it. It's just kind of a reality. And so how we can allocate time to our kids makes all the difference for them to recognize we value them. They know that. They value that time. And so they recognize that if we're either always on our phone or always at work or always doing something else, we don't really value them. Or if in our conversation we are talking to them, but we're distracted again by our phone or by our work or by other things, they sense that. They know that they are sort of delegated or relegated aside. They know that. They can sense it. And that's all about value, right? And
Right.
so just like my grandson would say, Papa, you want to play? He's just asking me to be there. And so he recognizes without being able to describe it that time equals value, right?
Right. We did something when the kids were smaller, that intentional one-on-one
Mhm.
parenting, where, if I would go into the store, I would take one kid with
Yep.
me.
Yep.
We had three really close together. So they got used to having that one-on-one time and looked forward to it and love, getting to dominate the conversation. So in my mind, as kids got older, I stopped doing that. But I've realized in the last year or so that they still want that. I mean, we were running errands. I was running errands with one daughter, and she said, "Oh, we get time together."
So
And
they
I
can
thought,
do it.
"Oh, I haven't really been doing this like we used to." And that still matters. So I
It
think it's a
becomes
good
the
reminder.
challenge as they become adolescents because they're not nearly as willing to say, I want that, or acknowledge that it's important to them. They still believe it is. And
Right.
so we as parents, I know this is just true for me, because it doesn't seem as apparent that they want it, and it's not as, they're not as excited when they say, oh, let's go do such a thing. We just tend to write it off.
Right.
And I would just also say this to parents, because again, I challenge myself in this. It does not have to be some grand, extravagant plan, that is either all day or even half a day. It's just designated time. So as you just described the grocery store, I mean, how glorious is that, right? I mean, there's nothing glorious about the grocery store, but it's time together, right? And so that can be important.
Right. So you also talked about this scripture from Mark where Jesus is talking and the children are coming, and Jesus says, let the children come to me, and how the disciples were trying to kind of push them back and keep them away. And Jesus showed them and showed the children that they were priority.
Mhm.
So I think that's a great lesson for us as a church, not just as parents, but us as a church and a community. So how can we honor that beyond just our daily family life?
Well, there you go. So again, this goes to what I just referred to as intentionality. We need to be much more intentional about setting aside time for people, whether friends or neighbors, or other family members, or for even other coworkers, for instance. And we all get busy in our stuff, right? And so we forget that we actually sort of need relationship and connection. And I
Right.
think that's all Jesus is demonstrating is how important connection is. And the reality is, every human being wants a couple of things, and one of them is to belong and to connect. And that being the case, Jesus was a master at that, right? He would spend time with people and, uh, just connect with them in very intentional ways on a lot of different levels. Some was
Right.
conversation, some was his healing touch, but um, he would deliberately give people his time. And I
Right.
think we do need to challenge ourselves in that. And my hope is that one of the positive outcomes in COVID is our recognition of how much we need that, right? Because even an introvert like myself has realized, I kind of like my time by myself, but also know I need other people and I need other relationships, and I am cherishing them even more than I did before because I'm not with them as much, right?
Right. I think it's a good lesson in kind of pausing to take notice of what's going on around you, because we are all busy. We're busy with work and families and kids and activities. And And Jesus would stop, and Jesus would take the time
Yep.
for someone that maybe other people wouldn't stop for. And I think this is a good reminder that we can all do that in every aspect of our lives, not just within parenting.
Right.
So
Right.
that's
Absolutely.
what I took away from it.
And the other challenge I would issue to parents is please, please, please engage spiritual conversation with your kids. I know it can feel intimidating or feel as though, golly, I'm not equipped or prepared, but I guarantee you, your child will cherish however you respond as long as it's pointing them to God, pointing them to a relationship with God. And it's all right to say, I don't know what that means, or I don't understand that, or I don't necessarily have an answer there. I think far too many of us as parents, because we don't have a pat answer or can't, think of it right off the bat, we get intimidated, and therefore we just don't talk about it at all. We never bring it up. We never offer any kind of thoughts to our kids about spirituality. And I just want to challenge us to get over that fear and enter the dialogue as often as you can, without being overbearing. That's not what I mean, but just every once in a while, just ask a sort of spiritually connected question, like, golly, how do you think God made that? Or does that remind you of anything God has done? Or, they can be very open-ended questions.
I think another thing along those lines is to let your children know why you worship. Why is worship a priority for your family? Why do you go to church, or why do you worship online? What does it mean to us? Because a lot of times I think parents are just, especially in a hurry on Sunday mornings, that we're going to all sit on the couch together and watch, or we're going to go to outdoor service together. But why are you doing that as a family? Just let them know this is part of our structure. This is part of our faith, and we want you to be a part of it.
We have the opportunity to address that question every single week in our house. Why are we doing this again? Why do we have to do? Well, the church isn't open. Why are we doing this?
It's online. I'll watch it later. Yes.
Indeed.
Oh, thank you. Okay, Alyssa, you can unmute.
I wait until it's my turn because I just love hearing y'all have the conversation.
So how is that different from other times? I wait until it's my turn.
Yeah. Other times I don't wait until it's my turn. I just assume it's my turn. All right. Thank y'all so much for leading us in this conversation. And I also want to do a really quick plug for Julie. This week, we released the second part of her podcast. So I really like to encourage you. She talks about specifically during times of COVID, how she's refocused her parenting and started to think differently about spiritual growth with her kids during this time. And so I'd like to encourage you to go to tmumc.org/podcast. You can also get it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, practically anywhere you listen to podcasts. You can find the Trietsch UMC podcast and listen to Julie.
Well,
so thank you so much for joining us today. And as always, you can catch all previous episodes of Go Beyond at tmumc.org/go beyond. And we will see you on Friday at 12:30 for another episode.
Bye-bye.